lurkers out there. We are back, your most favorite Babylons of the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Now with a new episode about the war prayer. The synopsis of this episode consists of two plot lines. The first one is a poet arriving at the station and getting attacked, which results in two more problems, since it's not the first attack of this kind, but several more happened before, all on alien species. And the second plot line is about two lovebirds from Centauri going there to get help, not from Londo, but of Vir, which is kind of cute. Yeah, and but before we dive into this episode, we have a nice question for our introduction purpose, and this time it is again about food. Yes, you get right. We love food. You can't see it, but we have to train regularly because we're eating so much. And the question in detail is, what is our favorite food we can't get at home? We're either because of the ingredients or because we're just unable to cook it ourselves. So maybe, Layla, how about you start with this question?
Yes, my favorite food that I can't really get at home is langos, which is a Hungarian street food dish that is just a fluffy fried thick piece of dough, basically that is spicy, a bit salty. And then traditionally you just put, without baking it, you just put sour cream and cheese on it and whatever you want on top, and it's super good. And the reason I can't get it at home is you need to fry it. I don't have equipment at home to fry it. And I have eaten langos in Germany on several Christmas markets and everywhere, and it was just never good. It was crispy, it had too much cheese. They just don't get it right. So I really only can eat the real langos whenever I'm in that makes it very, very special.
Then now I have to travel there because I really like to eat this on the Christmas market as well. And if you say it's not good, I guess I have to make a travel to Hungary.
It just doesn't taste like langos when I eat it in Germany, so.
Yeah, Alex, how about you?
Oh, I'm not so bold to go international. For me, it's in general Bavarian cuisine, especially Garmknödel and like good potato salad that doesn't just consist of a big hunk of mayonnaise. I'm very fond of the whole sort of eating tradition in the southern parts of Germany, and it's very hard to get these right here because, well, it's hard to get the right ingredients and such.
Okay, now I'm a puzzled that that's what you're saying. I'm a bit more exotic again. For me, it's ramen. I really love this Japanese soup. And I tried to make it at home several times, even with prepared soup that I bought, but it never gets the right way. So I gave it up, and I'm just eating it when I have the chance to go to an authentic Japanese restaurant or ramen bar. So into the episode we go. First impressions, and yeah, I have to start again. I already see it on your faces. And even though I was teased that this episode contains things that are not up my alley, I have to say I really like this episode. So, what are you saying now, Alex?
I'm just happy that you're not fooled by the episode title, so this is very nice. And I was very curious whether or not you would like this, because once again we have half the episode devoted to a big romance plot, and I'm happy to see that this one maybe struck more a chord than what we've seen of Catherine so far.
Yeah, it has a bit of a different taste. I mean, I would have appreciated if it would not been some kind of love interest or some
Wait, I think we're not talking about the same Romans here, right? Alex, you are talking about the Centauri kids, and you are talking about Ivanova's lover, right?
Are we?
I was talking about the Centauri kids, but maybe the...
Okay.
And you were
Okay.
about Susan, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I totally cut that out. Yeah, the two Centauri, they are cute because it's this it gives off this cute little feeling of, oh my god, they're two young people who found each other, that's saying, oh my god, you're my world, I want to marry you. But it's not in an overbearing way. It feels still fresh and yeah, young, and not this thing we have with older couples. No, that sounds wrong. I'm not sure how to say what I want to say. The point is that with Ivanova and her dude, it didn't work the first time, obviously, and this second tries, it feels most of the time kind of wrong for me, because the people have to change, had to go through a lot of change, both parties, to make it work then, and that usually is not the case. And yeah, it's a bit sad for me to see that it's another romance interest or formal love interest appearing here for the plot. I don't know. Can it just be? Why can't they be just friends?
Well, in this episode, I will argue that it adds something because there's just an extra level of ickiness about it because they were so much closer in the beginning. But before we drift off into complete discussions, let's not forget about Layla's first impressions.
Yeah, first impression. I have to say that when I first watched this, I was a bit rolling my eyes, I guess, because I felt like at this point we don't really have like an overview of what happens on Earth and an overview of all of the political positions that we have. And the only thing that sometimes ends up with us on the station is that there were some Nazi dudes beating people up. And when I watched that for the first time a few years ago, I was like, this is so old school. I guess today they would figure out new ways, like no one is that dumb. But I learned my lesson now that is definitely how these movements show up, and how you notice them and how they just surface at some point. So yeah, I think this episode really is where it starts to get interesting, and it gives us a lot of things that make Babylon 5 later on what it is. So I think it's one where the first season really like gets some pace.
See, this is your first impression years ago when you were young and naive, and we didn't have like a major movement of old German nobles trying to reinstate the Kaiser. So
I just thought differently.
Yeah. But okay, so I guess perspectives have changed, and now this feels like a quite poignant episode. Is this somewhat correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I would totally agree on that. I mean, it's you hear these arguments they have in this episode, and you think this feels way too real for comfort.
I love that they literally drop the line, all these aliens are stealing our jobs, and this is like 30 years on, it's still a slogan that definitely gets you some votes, so that is beautiful.
So what's your first impression, Alex?
Well, I
can remember.
Yeah, my original first impression, honestly, I cannot remember. That's too long ago, and honestly, when I first was watching Babylon 5, I was watching it mostly on the sidelines while doing something else. I didn't really concentrate on it, so I never would have bothered to take notes or anything like that. But no, this time around, I don't know, it didn't feel as momentous as I remember it being. I feel like this time around I was already paying more attention to sort of what's going on, happening on Earth, and we already had like some headlines in newspapers on Home Guard, and yeah, it just felt like, okay, this is a natural continuation of what we've already seen. What gets me every time is the Centauri side plot. I find it so endearing for Vir, and actually quite endearing for Londo as well in some scenes. So no, I really, really like this one, and yeah, it's not often that he gets to impart any kind of wisdom on the younger generation that doesn't revolve around killing Narn. So I'm just very happy that for once he had like a slightly even maybe positive outlook on life. So that was just nice to see.
I totally forgot to mention it, but the Centauri part is one that I also always really enjoy. Yeah.
Since you enjoy it so much, why don't we start with that?
Yeah, and definitely includes one of my favorite Londo quotes. I know we already had a few ones. Actually, at some point I have to post all of them. I just have to list them. Londo said, as long as you can still do it, because at some point in the show you want to stop doing it, I guess. But so one of my favorite ones here in this episode was this. What was it? My shoes are too tight and I forgot how to dance, which is where he acknowledges that he knew all of these feelings, that he was the young ones, and that he understands the situation, but he just grew into this position that he has to be someone in the Centauri Empire. I think that's a beautiful way to acknowledge I'm old, I've had such a life, but I've been there once and I know how.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a beautiful sort of personal moment for him, especially with him telling that this is something that he understands from his father, and now he's imparting this to Vir and Vir to his cousin. So it's this intergenerational thing, and this feels like something that you could even put into the larger scope of Centauri society as a whole. Like, I feel like we get a good insight into what Centauri, all of them are, because so far it's been very limited to Londo's perspective, and that's very much this like older, bitter perspective, yearning for the old empire. And here we see two young lovebirds who honestly seem like they do not care about the Centauri Republic at all. They have bigger concerns. They do not care about the grand destiny of their family and status and title, like everything Londo always talks about. They are in love and they want to facilitate that. And we have Vir, who is trying to support them in this. So all the younger Centauri that we are seeing in this episode seem to be able to move forward from this like grand vision of destiny that Londo always has, which is a very hopeful note in this episode, if he manages to get this across. And even if it's just what Londo is doing, that he is letting go of his old grievances and feelings and saying, okay, I never got to enjoy myself with love and all that. Maybe I'm going to be able to get them this chance. And, you know, if this is something that we see in a larger scope in this society, maybe this is something that they can use to move on. If they manage to sort of go from one generation to the next without carrying over all these old sentiments.
Actually, I love that scene where Londo is not on board yet, and where Vir kind of has to convince him to think about these young ones, and where Londo has all of the portraits of all of his wives and points to them. Like, they are the reason why I'm here. So which is like always on this border of he has to know that he is making fun of himself. He has to know that this is live satire that you can watch, but he's also so strict in it, and I just love that scene. Like, what does he call this wife's pestilence and whatever? Like,
famine, death, and pestilence. Like, they are the deadly sins or the riders of the apocalypse. And I mean, and in this scene here's another quote which might qualify as one of the favorite quotes. Love has nothing to do with marriage, which is very quotable, but also like gives us a very good perspective once again into Centauri society, where we are in this almost kind of feudalism where you marry out of duty and to advance sort of the social standing that your family has.
But also, sorry, it's quite ironic that he says it. I mean, a few episodes before, I think it was with the Purple Files, where he wanted to marry the dancer.
Mm.
That he would have done this because of love and nothing else. And here he is stating that love has nothing to do with marriage. So I think that's also one of the reasons when he turns around later. After he is kind of reminded about this through Mayan.
Yeah, I think we can wonder, like, how much is his initial reaction to these lovebirds also sort of rooted in his resentment, like his love with Adira didn't work out, so now he's sort of damaged from this and at first opposed, but then because of this experience he can also warm up to it a little bit better because he remembers, okay, this went very wrong for me, but maybe specifically because of that, I should strive to enable this in others.
And I mean, especially his reaction and his thoughts of on his father with this shoe quote, he manages to rise above this. He's becoming more than the ones before him. And I think that's also quite an achievement there, especially in this reflection of, I didn't get this, but I don't take this as an excuse to limit others, to cause pain to others. I take this experience and help you to have it better than I had.
And as long as we're talking about memorable Londo quotes, the final one that I noted down is when he's in sickbay and the couple gets attacked and there's this injury and she wants to stay by the side of her boyfriend, and he has this initial reaction of saying, no, do not do this, because she will be absolutely devastated if it goes wrong, if he ends up dying, and she stayed by his side. And I find it interesting that there he still has this sort of, kind of grumpy disposition about it. But still here you can see that there is some logic behind this that I find somewhat compelling. Like, for somebody who has led a life where he's been hurt a lot of times, has seen a lot of grief, it makes sense that he would adopt this sort of outlook. But then he already is at this stage where he seems receptive to the Minbari poet telling him, well, but there's also this belief in love and its healing power, and trying to pursue this is something worthwhile. So I like that he kind of does this transition from having a quote where he's entirely opposed to love to having this sort of more reasonable, okay, there is reasons to pursue it, but also reasons to try and stay away from it, to protect yourself from harm. And then he finally comes around. Like, there's a nice progression in this.
Yes, totally. I also totally love the interaction between the Minbari poet, I've forgotten her name, and Londo there in sickbay, because I just love how these two sentiments completely clash. That's kind of wonderfully written, I think. And what I also think, what you can see here is that he knows all of these emotions, and he just learned how to live with the way of the Centauri Empire. And I mean, actually, I think it's not even so, unique, because I mean, historically, when you think of human society, I think even in medieval times, feudal times, whatever, when you were just married for as a simple farmer, for example, when you were just married to someone who could care for you and take care of you, or was good for your family or whatever, people there were also aware that love was something else. People had affairs, people had love somewhere else, but being married was important because, who took care of you when you got pregnant? You could really feed your children, because that was a big issue. And so, I guess we always had this society works, try to get as can besides it. Like, even in medieval times, you had like attempts for birth control, you had attempts for abortions and whatever. It was always like that, kind of. Yeah, and I find that interesting to see. Because the solution, I think, no, that was my point, sorry, I forgot my point. Because the solution that you see in the end is that finds a way for these two to get to win time and to get together inside the system. Like, he doesn't have them to flee or to go to an outside colony or to move to Earth or whatever. He finds a way how they can get what they want inside of the society and how the system works. And that's what I find very remarkable about the solution of all of this.
And I mean, you're a bigger expert on early modern times than any of us, I think. But to me, this almost feels like it's very typical for a society that is kind of stuck in this between the medieval times where it's complete feudalism, where all of these sort of extra measures exist, and it's fully accepted that marriage and love are separate things, and so it kind of works in that way. And then the completely modern appreciation of saying, okay, no, love is all about like getting married and having this like little nuclear family and such, and you get in this like awkward spot in between where none of the two sides are fully supported yet. Which reminds me of sort of the Victorian times where everything gets like even stricter and more taboo and in many ways more terrible than it ever was in feudal times, because these very rigid systems weren't enforced in the same way.
Yes, totally. It's like when these medieval times end, you suddenly have this people that think that they are the first generation that has emotion, that they are the first generation that like protested, that are in love, and yeah, it does interesting things to a society. Yeah, although I wouldn't say that the Centauri are on that level in like modern Victorian age yet. I think they're only just slowly opening up.
They are in a very weird spot in general.
Yeah.
I mean, we already established that they're some sort of mixture of different early cultures, so I don't think we necessarily have to put it in our line of time to say that they're at that point or that point, just roughly, okay, this aspect is fitting in, and we'll see how it develops, or if it develops at all.
Yes.
Anything more on Londo in this storyline? Otherwise, I would love to veer a little bit into Vir.
Yeah. Sure.
Just because I find it quite... Obviously, it's very endearing the way that he has to sort of deal with this and confess to Londo what he's done, but I do think it's interesting that we see for the first time, for all the sort of bumbling buffoon that Vir is often portrayed as, he knows how to use his station, and he knows that status is important, and back home he has managed to like uphold an image of himself as a much more important official than he actually is. And from everything that we've learned about Centauri society, upholding this image is actually much more important than the job that he actually does in terms of his societal standing. So as far as this goes, he's being a very good Centauri in this episode. Like or at least up to the point where the whole like House of Cards bundles together, and then he has to like have Londo fix his issues. But up to this point, he knows how to play the political game, at least a little bit. That's quite impressive.
What I find interesting is, first, there is no scolding from Londo when he realizes what Vir did. I mean, he just accepts it, and okay, now we have to take care of this mess. And a second thing is that later on, I'm not sure what it was that Vir was saying, something about the traditions and stuff, where Londo says, "Oh, you've been studying. I'm proud of you," which means he's observing these things to see, okay, how can I handle things? How do I get by with all this? And on the same time, you clearly see that he's distancing himself from these traditions where he can. I mean, especially when he says, why can't these two marry because of love? What would happen if to the great Centauri Republic? So, or he's really saying it in a challenging way. I mean, Lando's not really in a position to, in a mental or emotional position to go against this. So maybe he just managed to get the right point or the right time to exactly say this without consequences for him. But I mean, I think it's showing perfectly how capable he is in many ways.
And I think it's also a very nice point for him to make, that it's kind of silly for somebody like the great ambassador of the Centauri Republic to be so concerned about a love marriage happening, because I think this is something that we very often see, where issues are raised about, what kinds of marriage are allowed, what is seen as the moral image of what a family should look like, that this is very often talked about in these things like, oh, if we allow a new kind of marriage, this is basically the downfall of Western civilization right there, and it's like all hanging in the balance. And I love for Vir to point out that, that it's a little bit silly to, on the one hand, like, always go on about these great traditions and then portray them as so fragile that they would be threatened by something like this. So I think there's a nice little sting that he puts there.
I mean, if you want to put it to I try again. If you want to compare it to the modern times, the newest thing would be the marriage between homosexual partners. I mean, how many people out there are you ruin the marriage? And I mean, okay, there's a lot of religious nonsense in it. Sorry for the religious people, but yeah, that's my opinion on that. And it's still a thing. It's still something that is talked about.
And talked about in these terms of life and death for the nation, life and death for the civilization. Like there are always these very strong hyperbole where it just gets so silly so very fast. But okay, anything more on this plot in particular?
I don't think it gives more.
No. I mean, we can just go straight to the intersection point where obviously part of this plot is the attack that is directed against the Centauri, but we start the episode a little bit earlier on where we get the interaction between Dylan and Shalmayan, who is the Minbari poet.
Before we jump in there, I would like to note that what I really liked about this episode, that even though we have two plot lines here, that they intervened with each other at some point. And so we didn't have this two things running parallel to each other, but because of the being there at the same place, being on the station, they affect each other. And that I really like that. That was something a bit not missing, but I think it makes more of these two plots and the story itself.
See, this is something that I can get into internet arguments about how much different Babylon 5 plots really depend on each other. And for the most part, I usually think there are good reasons why two plots are next to each other. And at least thematically, they often mirror each other. But it's absolutely true that both thematically and just in terms of what is actually happening, we have like a very nice intersection here on multiple times. I especially like the fact that the side character introduced for the A story, the Minbari poet, gets to weigh in on the issue of the Centauri lovers, which is just, yeah, of course, she's an interesting character to have something to say about this. So it's nice that she gets that chance.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think you just really realize how this is one world that is connected, because now we have across the species people that share this fate. I really like that we see that something that happens on the station is relevant for the whole galaxy, for everyone involved.
And not even just on the station, even that things that are happening back on Earth are also having an effect on Babylon 5, right? Like there is, we've seen this brewing in the background and now it's finally like coming to a head.
What I would throw in now, I really liked also that there was our Dr. Ben and our former telepath from the Gathering were mentioned and used as a backstory. So even though for whatever reasons there was to put other actors in there, they still used this plot line. They still used the characters to enrich the story, and not just let them fall off the plate, which I also was really happy to see, because that's usually not something happening in other series, because these people are usually just forgotten or pretended they never existed. And here they even got a story why they are no longer there.
I mean, this is a great chance to just sing the praises of the creator one time, because obviously it's often praised that Babylon 5 had this big 5-year plan, a story that was planned out in advance that can play out, so everything is very connected and such. But it is only one half of the story. The other half is that JMS is also somebody who is very, very good at adapting to things, adapting to difficult monetary situations, adapting to limited sets, and adapting to staff changes very quickly. And so one of the things that he did, which is something that to this day not every show manages to do, is that for every character, he had what he basically talked about as trapdoors. So at any point, they can leave the stage, and there's going to be a good reason for this, and it's going to be a chance usually for them to be utilized in the story or even make a return if that is possible. And this is something that we saw, like with Dr. Ben, for example, here very, very clearly, where not only does he get part of the backstory here, but it also ties into what we've seen already. We've seen EarthGov collect the organic technology because they're interested in this, so of course they would also collect the scientists who have seen a boron. Like, that just falls completely in line with what they're usually doing.
Also, you just have to appreciate what kind of mindset the writer has to always prepare for these cases and always have everything like that ready.
You can tell he already had a little bit of experience
with TV, yeah. But yeah.
On the other hand, there are enough people who write quite a long time for TV or anything like that, and they are not prepared. So I think that's also something you have to decide on, that you will, if there are any problems or occasions where you have to rewrite things, you rewrite it in a way the characters are not forgotten. And I think that's also some sort of dedication just for writing a good story.
A dedication, I think, also a level of humility where you have to just accept, I have a vision of this story, how I want it to play out, and it is not what is going to happen. At some point, outside circumstances are going to happen, and then I can't just hold on. I mean, he could have also just said, no, but I want Takashima to be the second in command, so I will just recast her. And viewers just have to accept this, which often enough happens in TV. But no, he said, okay, so this character is just not going to work out. That's a shame. And this immediately massively changes some of the plans he had for the show. But he just goes with it. And this is something we will see throughout the entire show, that the original vision of Babylon 5 looked entirely different, would have been an entirely different show than what we eventually got. And arguably, because of all the adversity, we got maybe even a better show than he originally imagined, because he was willing to give up on this original vision and do something else.
Love the problem, not the solution.
Yes, yes.
So maybe we could get started talking about this Earth Homeguard plot, not Earth Force, Homeguard plot.
Before we start with Earth, there's one scene I would love to talk about that has nothing to do with Earth, if that's fine. I would just love to hear your thoughts on the very first scene where we see Shamayan and Dylan together, because we don't get much Minbari on Minbari interaction, let alone with Lanier not involved, so I think it's a nice insight to see just how close these two are, and especially with Dylan being this very high-ranking member of society, and then there is a poet who obviously has a similar sort of level of respect bestowed upon her, and they can be like very casual or even intimate around each other.
The first thought was, oh, a girls' night.
Yes.
Yeah,
I miss the pajamas.
It just really shows that some things are sorted differently in the Minbari society than we know that. And actually what I regret a bit about that is that we don't get to see her perform. Because I know that our writer definitely would have come around with something. There is a later episode where he summarizes in one sentence, or a character summarizes in one sentence, how humor works for Minbari and how in contrast it works for humans. So he knows how Minbari humor works traditionally. There definitely would have been some great poetry, but sadly we didn't get to see it. And I don't think we ever will, right?
At least not from her, no. And it is something interesting to speculate about what Minbari poetry looks like, sounds like. From the way that it's talked about in this episode, I always got this impression that it's something very ancient. I'm usually reminded of like the sung myths that you get to hear if you visit like Italy or stuff, and they recite like the old tales there in the original language and such. It feels almost like this more oral tradition of long form poetry.
Yeah. But yeah, so we see that the poet and the politician like Dylan are in a kind of case, in a kind of status that they are close and that they have a similar level of respect. That's interesting, definitely. I think the poet here kind of to me looks more like a preacher in a positive way. Does that make sense?
It does, especially if we learn what her plan was. Her plan was to go to Earth and share Minbari culture there. So it's almost like the role of a missionary that doesn't have to convert people to his faith, but just actually brings a little bit of culture and exchanges ideas and such. And once again, this is something that would be very interesting to see, and something that, from what we've seen so far, Earth might really need right now is like a little bit of influence, cultural influence from outside its own borders, because they seem to be getting a little bit stuffy in there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Home Guard plot, maybe. I mean, yeah, as I said, I'd always found it difficult that we have this plot that just develops with people showing up and punching someone. But I think that's definitely how you see or how you notice on the surface a certain level of radicalization that has already happened.
Yes, and it would be very interesting to talk maybe a little bit about why this has happened, because obviously we know Earth has fought the war against the Minbari, and this is something that Sinclair utilizes in this plot later on very much, that this is obviously a source of hatred against aliens, but then we also see that this is a group that just outright hates everything that is not human. So there is this war maybe put forward as an excuse or as a reason why this is, but there's definitely also a more fundamental ideology around that, just hating the other.
I mean, if it would be just about the war, then technically they would just hate the Minbari.
Yeah.
From as far as we, or at least I know, it was humans against Minbari, and the rest stood to the side and maybe threw in their 50 cents, but that was it. So the primary targets would have been Minbari, but it's said that the ones attacked are prominent aliens in general.
Yes.
So, and I mean, it's obviously done with a bigger
plan, conspiracy.
plan. Yes. So, can we cut that out, please? Oh my God.
Yes, we can, but I will put it up as a special teaser clip for everyone to see.
Yeah, lovely. I hate you. It is obviously done with a bigger plan in mind, since why would you use prominent aliens for the world to see, or the universe to see in this case? And it's obviously done on the station, on Mars, on Earth, and it's 6 attacks in 2 weeks. I think that's quite a count for attacks in such a short time.
Yeah, and we see that this is a systemic problem, like something that is not happening just in Babylon 5 because they have a problem there, but no, it is something that is happening all over. And yeah, I would love to talk about the plan and also a little bit maybe about the deeper-rooted causes for this, because one thing that is reiterated every time in the intro is that Babylon 5 is the place for aliens and humans to meet. And I think one of the things that Babylon 5 does really well here is that it explains to us early on that our perspective on the universe is a special one. Most people probably do not come into contact with aliens very often. Most people on human colonies and such have very specific interactions with them, and it's probably very easy to get a completely distorted view of these aliens if you are in this more isolated human society outside of Babylon 5. And this then also gives us maybe a little bit of an explanation why is everyone so easily on board with Sinclair playing the big racist commander, where he takes this role on like very thickly. And yeah, why a group like this can radicalize so much. Because just looking at Babylon 5, I would argue it feels like it would be very easy to disprove a lot of the talking points that they're making there.
I mean, it's quite easy to influence people, especially if they actually have no interaction with the other party, but just hear stories. And if the stories, no matter how exaggerated they are, if they are told by a person these people trust, they accept it quite easily. The closer you are to a person, you're less prone to ask, is that true what you're telling me? And just accept it because you know that person. I mean, the other one doesn't have to necessarily have ill intentions, just maybe a misunderstanding or even leaving out information because you think, that's unimportant, and to make the story shorter or better or whatever. But yeah, that's how things like this happen. And on the other aspect, I just have to throw in, I read this on a public bathroom, but I really liked it because it's simple and still explains it's in its simplicity explains so much. It's was something along the lines of, nationalism is when you grow up hating people you never met and being proud of things you never done. And I think it hits so on point. And from this to racism, because of all this, they take our jobs as if they are yours already. I think it's not far.
And I also think an important point is we know that this group is not fully focused on Minbari, so the war cannot be the only reason, but I think they can still draw a lot of power from the fear this war has caused, because it was only 10 years ago, and it is still like a collective memory humans have, that they were almost wiped out. And so everything strange and everything alien that you probably were not that much in touch with yet to draw this, to wake up this fear again, this existential fear of everything that's strange, is very easy.
And it comes back exactly to the quote that you just brought up, Meike, being proud of stuff that you haven't done. Sinclair himself brings us to the point where he says, I fought on the line against the alien invasion that legitimately was threatening Earth. And as far as we know, none of the Home Guard people actually did that. So it is like they view themselves as these like paragons of humanity and guardians against the alien threat, but were never actually the guys that did the heavy lifting when it actually came to that. And from that position, I think then it also becomes very easy for them to say, well, we look at this situation and say, okay, if it was only about the Minbari war, why are they also attacking other aliens? But to the Home Guard, it might just be the thing, well, it doesn't matter if it's a Minbari or if it's Centauri. Aliens invaded Earth. That's the story. And it doesn't really matter to them whether that was a Minbari fleet or a combined fleet of the entire galaxy. And it's this like lumping everyone as one that makes this very easy.
Yeah, because it's different, it's unknown, so it's dangerous, and we should hate it. That is where it gets down to.
Yeah.
Because everything that is unknown I mean, why? If you look back in history, that's why a lot of people had to face hate and everything along this line. Because they did something and others didn't understand. Maybe a few did, but the most just couldn't, because something like inventions or something was never there. And yeah, that's how things develop here.
That, I mean, it is Ivanova's lover from the past who also wasn't at the war, I guess. If I remember correctly, they split up because she wanted to join Earth's force, and then
yeah, something like that. She's talking about going to Io, one of one moon of one planet. I'm not sure.
Well, it's like a major colony in the solar system that they have.
And then they broke up. Yeah. So that's kind of like, yeah. I kind of think that is even more, that also brings in your last point, Meike, because when the war started and someone like Susan or someone like Sinclair or whoever else decided to serve, decided to join the military, decided to do anything. I mean, you could also, I think we see that a lot, you can also, when a war starts, do other things, but just deal with the situation, deal with the problem, face the reality in any kind. It can be like any kind of other social work that is needed, whatever. And that is a way to adapt to the situation and to force reality as it is. And these home guard people, characterized through this person from Ivanova's past, I forgot his name.
Malcolm.
Someone like Malcolm actively decided not to do that. So this strange and this fear became like this phantom, basically, because it was never really encountered. It was just he didn't actually act anything according to that situation at that point, as far as we know. So yeah, what you just said, I can imagine that then there is a lot of hate and a lot of skepticism developing towards anyone who was able to do that, towards anyone who was able to act and to go to war or to help in other situations. Also, when we was working with aliens now, because it is facing a reality that people kind of didn't ever really accept.
And if we are talking about Malcolm, I think this is also the point where I do genuinely think there is some merit to him being a former lover of Ivanova's, just to bring home the point that when we are talking about Home Guard, we aren't talking about some like obscure group of weirdos that have been sitting in their basement too much on the internet and like getting radicalized that way. No, these are people that's a motorcycle. Thanks. These are people that have been part of our characters' lives, that our characters even had intimate relationships with, without ever getting to the point of fully like noticing how radicalized these people might become. So we aren't talking about this group of space Nazis as other faction. No, these are part of humanity, and this is what makes them so concerning, because this is also what allows them to make friends in high places, which is emphasized very much in this episode, that as bad as these people are on their own, as much of a threat that they pose, these visions of grandeur that they have, of like a grand plan to have mass assassinations and stuff like that, are only possible because there are people on the inside. There are people as part of the military and such who are willing to support this, or at least look the other way when it happens.
And I also think that it has a special tip of nostalgia that it was a lover and not a friend, because I think they were very young when they were together. They must have been in their early 20s, probably.
Yeah.
Probably younger even. And so it's like, it has a special pain to it when someone that you were that nostalgic with, that you can be that nostalgic with, someone that you spent your fragile years with, basically, and you meet them later on and you realize you had your little difference there, but now you are like universes apart, basically. Like now they became really the very thing that you fight, that you are against. I guess that has a special intensity to it, because you were lovers, and 10 years later you basically are on two different sides of a puzzle. And that kind of really shows in a very emotional way, I guess, what happens to a society when something like such a Nazi movement takes over. I had that. My very first boyfriend, years after I was together with him, joined a far-right party in Germany, which is like my biggest nightmare. So I find that very nicely written, and always touches me very personally, that you just see a person and you're like, yeah, we had our differences, we had our different opinions and so many things, but now you are like my personal enemy. Like you are not everything want to fight against, and that always touches me very much.
And I mean, this is something that, of course, it has this nostalgic twinge to it, that this is obviously painful to have in your past, but then it will also massively like sort of damage your own self-perception, right? Like you, at least somebody like Ivanova, who says in the end, I never knew you. Obviously, she doesn't seem like somebody who believes in people changing all that much. So to her, it's immediately this question, okay, if I was so wrong about this guy, how can I ever trust my own judgment again? Like, I obviously am a very poor judge of character at this point, which not everybody subscribes to this, but at least the way she deals with this, that she says, I need to be there when he's arrested. I need to tell him to his face that I never knew him, that it was never real, seems to me like she's kind of trying to establish for herself, like, my perception back then must have been fundamentally wrong because somebody just doesn't turn that corner that must have been always there.
So I mean, definitely at that point where he was involved in killing someone and attacking and murdering people, that is something where I also understand that. I mean, with my friend in my past, I just say, like, okay, we were 16, and then I realized you were dumb and never grew up. Because he, so far as I know, he never killed someone. But yeah, at that point, I definitely get that because, yeah, I think it's kind of you have to have a certain level of evilness inside of you, accept another person dying or helping another person dying, I guess. So there, I completely get her.
I mean, it's always a difference if it's done in a situation, in an effect reaction, or if it's something where you plan it, where you say, okay, this person has to die and I will need this, and I will do it this and that way. I think that's a different kind of human person being. You have to go that far.
Absolutely. Should we talk about the way that the Home Guard is dealt then? Because we have this entire second half where Sinclair kind of makes this plan, finds out that Malcolm is somebody from Ivanova's past, and they then utilize this to kind of go with the idea, okay, let's get let's get close to them. Although before we do that, we talked about already how this is a very poignant episode, how it actually manages to hold a mirror to the modern recurrence of these kinds of issues really well. And this is something that Babylon 5 isn't generally praised for, but especially because this is usually a strength of the show, I would like to talk very briefly at least about the one scene of this episode where I feel this doesn't hold so true. And this is right around the midpoint of this plot where the attack on the Centauri has happened, and we get this one scene of, well, they called it a mob that is being churned on by Jakar, who is giving this big speech of humans are investigating human crimes against aliens. Obviously, there have been no arrests. This is an outrage. If a Narn gets attacked like this, then there's going to be a big violent outburst against this. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on this, because out of everything that the episode does with this premise, I feel like this is the weakest link.
Why?
Mainly because I think with a lot of elements, this show is very good anticipating how these issues come about and how society reacts to them. But I feel like what we've seen in the past decade or two is that, yes, these kinds of issues do usually result in there being protests or even riots in the streets. And it's good that the episode acknowledges this. Like, this isn't just some like fun crime case for Garibaldi to solve, but this is something that has ramifications on the station. But then this confrontation between the police force, the authorities, and the people that are in the streets, I feel like is framed in a very simplified way, and also resolved in a very simplified way, where they kind of say, okay, Jakar, let's just assume that this was a big misunderstanding, go home, and then everything is fine. And I think from all the examples that we've seen, whether it's protests around climate change, protests around reform in France, or protests around issues of racism in America, we've always seen that you cannot deal with the people that actually go take to the streets in this way. Like, it doesn't usually end with them shaking hands and saying, oh, this was a bad misunderstanding, let's go home now. Usually there is some level of escalation there, and I feel like the episode just kind of falls short of showing that. And paints a very simplified picture of what these consequences would be like. And I'm mainly focusing on this here because I think later on the show has bigger and better examples of showcasing this. So I think this one just sticks out for me as one of the lesser ones.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean. It feels too soft. What's happening there on both sides. Yeah. I think what is a bit of a problem there is that that G'Kar is standing up there because we don't know about the former attacks, and obviously there was no Narn attack, so it kind of feels wrong having him up there. Even though I'm not sure if I saw that right, but I think when G'Kar first talks to Sinclair after the attack, where he's something talking like, I have no love for the Minbari and their poetry, but I think I'm not sure if I saw right, but it seemed to me like you had a bit of a teary eye in this scene. So like he was actually sad about the poet being attacked because maybe he really liked the poetry or whatever was the reason. Kind of felt like that in that moment. But still, it feels wrong because we don't have an emotional connection there. And therefore, it feels a bit fake when he stands up and, at the front of the crowd and trying to heat them up. And also, they seemed a bit too calm. Maybe it was because there were not enough people, not enough actors, but it feels not enough in many ways.
Yes, I think that also adds up to the impression that I had at first when I watched the episode the first time years ago. And I felt like, okay, now we have someone like G'Kar standing up there and just staging this protest, but it feels a bit like I read in a book for social studies that, okay, then there must be a protest, and it doesn't feel like there's much behind it. And at that point, at least the episode doesn't show that to us, doesn't give that to us. Yeah.
What I will say, G'Kar has been known to have a big appreciation for women of all species, and he has been known to sing very recently, so I think there is some validity to this, that maybe he is a very big fan of this poetry. But yeah, I think I agree completely with both of you that the fact that it is G'Kar, who not so long ago has been this conniving villain and has been very opportunistic, and because we don't get confirmation that there have been Narn attacks, it kind of creates this question, is he even genuine in anything that he's saying, or is he just utilizing this opportunity to sort of put himself in a leader position, which is kind of odd because in terms of what he's actually saying, he does have a point, or at least he would have had a good reason to be suspicious of the way that humans are dealing with this issue, because in general, Earth Alliance seems to be going this route of maybe not caring so much about alien murders on stations like this. And so I think this just creates an uncomfortable tension.
And I mean, he has a point that humans alone probably should not be the one investigating it. Like, that definitely brings me back to a point that I've brought up so often. And I think in the next episode, we're going to discuss, I'm going to bring it up even more, that we have this attempt of an international coalition in our intergalactical coalition in this early stage, but we have no institutions yet that can actually reassure this. So we would need here really like an independent force that can take over. Yes. Like something like a higher court or something like the Hague or something, and we don't have that yet. So it's like, which one of these nations has like the right to investigate it on their own? None really. They all have to work together, and that's not established.
Yeah, and I think for me this is also what kind of makes the resolution to the right scene, because like you said, they all seem a little bit of calm, and I think this also then undersells if you have these like rising tensions with these like extremist group that are coming about and people are protesting against that. It is unfortunately often the case that these protests also become in and of themselves a problem. They can become violent, they can become damaging, which then also becomes damaging to any kind of genuine cause trying to deal with these issues. And this then leads to these confrontations also with the state that Garibaldi here represents. And by not having any of that, it kind of neglects a big source of conflict that I think would be worth exploring a little bit more. And obviously, like, this is probably not the last time we're going to have an opportunity like this. Just in this specific instance, I feel like it falls a little bit short. Which isn't to say that I don't love Jakar up on the pedestal preaching, because as usual his performances are really really passionate here. So that's always good to see.
Do we have more on the home guard?
I think how Sinclair deals with it, because we should not forget Sinclair once again goes himself in the middle of the rioting mob, puts himself there, and his solution is also, I am going to pretend I'm a Nazi, and I am going to single-handedly burn all the bridges with alien ambassadors for the single purpose of bringing down this one criminal, which is a bold plan to say the least.
Yes, I always wondered if this ambassador that they basically used as that was captured, then really had these fearful minutes of not knowing what happened or what was going to happen, and if Sinclair would save her. I would have liked to see them making up at some point, to see some kind of reconciliation.
They will have some difficult meetings after this, I presume.
Yes, certainly. And I mean, he's burning bridges with everyone there. I mean, okay, Kosh is, I was surprised he appeared. But on the other hand, Kosh is out of the picture. I mean, he's saying we take no interest in the affairs of others, where I was a bit puzzled, because that's technically the job of an ambassador, but okay.
He's also saying this while watching on his TV Earth history. Like, very clearly he's having interest, just not in what is happening right now.
Yeah. And the others that are present in this moment where Sinclair says, the investigation is over, I don't know, but honestly, normally they would have his head. I mean, he has nothing. He is not apologetic and even aloft to a certain degree, and dismissing them just like that, with nothing, and they are still harmed aliens, harmed people, and he's disregarding this with everything he's got.
And
I mean, that the station is not blown up is everything that's missing there.
I think what is very telling here is not only how boldly he does this, but also that it works. That the other ambassadors look at this reaction from an Earth commander and say, that sounds about right. This is something that an Earth commander would do. And also that the Home Guard looks at this and says, that sounds like something an Earth commander would do. So it just gives us an insight of what the average officer of Earth Force probably is like, that this is something that they accept as on face value. And like Layla just mentioned, it tells us also like how little of an actual international cooperation there is in this station. At the end of the day, this showcases no Earth runs the station, and for the most part, if Earth says the investigation is over, then it's over, and the other governments can't really do anything about it, save for blowing up the station, which luckily they are not willing to do so easily. But very clearly there isn't much of a middle ground there, and that is like a massive flaw just kind of unveiled here.
Yeah, and I mean, you already said it, what will happen after that? I mean, yes, okay, he is doing this because he wants to get the culprits, but are they really okay with this? So how you can lie to me and treat me like shit just to get this done? I mean, if I was in that position, I would say, okay, maybe this time I'm not going to punch a hole in your face, but the next time you'll do it differently. Because, I mean, there's no respect at all, actually.
And especially because, I mean, what does this mean to the other ambassadors? At the end of the story, they can say, now I understand Sinclair is actually a good guy. He had this elaborate ruse because he had to do it this way. Fine, even if the ambassador is completely understanding of this, they still only tells us, okay, now they might have sympathy for Sinclair, the person, but definitely not anymore for Earth Force, the organization, because even if they give Sinclair every benefit of the doubt, what they are left with is seeing there is one good man in an organization that is so corrupt or so undermined by its like xenophobic structures that he had no other choice than lying to us to get his point across. So in terms of actually forging diplomatic relations between Earth as a faction and the rest of the galaxy, this must be a massively damaging event, even if people are like understanding enough and kind enough to say, okay, what Sinclair did, I can forgive.
Yeah, I agree.
In this case, should we go to the end, to the shootout? Because this early on in the show, a shootout is definitely how almost every issue gets resolved.
Yeah, and Sinclair in the middle of it. But at this, I mean, when the mob was where he happened, when he stepped in there, that was stupid. But I think in this situation, he didn't have much of a choice. I mean, it was to get the hook working, he had to be the bait. And therefore, it's not that bad that he's in this situation.
Especially because this time he's not running into the fight head first in full combat gear with his gun. In this situation, it's more like, okay, I am going to be in the place where the fight breaks out, but as soon as the shooting starts, my main goal is getting into cover, hunkering down and keeping the ambassador safe, and then Garibaldi and his security team are coming in and actually securing the situation. So as like if he is going to be involved in a firefight, this is much more in line with what I would expect the commander to do than anything else.
Certainly, yes. That was what one would expect.
What I'm always thinking at the end is when we see all of them arrested, and they are arrested and being sent to this prison ship and being sent back to Earth, is that at this point it may not be completely clear, but already here I wondered into what kind of political climate are they being sent back? Like, will there even be a trial that gets them a real punishment? Like, this group is earning influence and is earning friends in big places. Can we even be reassured that they treat them like they deserve to be treated? Like, at this point, it's at least not completely clear to me anymore.
I mean, what I will say is we have seen a headline in the universe today of like big like leaders of pro-Earth organization being arrested at some point. So there's definitely still a part of the Earth justice system that locks people like this up. I don't think they're going to go out there unscathed. But I mean, we definitely learned they do have friends in high places. Somebody gave them this very high-end Earth equipment that they are not supposed to have. Now, personally, I doubt that any of these guys are important enough that somebody is going to not simply deny their involvement. But who knows? It is definitely not unthinkable that somebody bails them out very quickly.
What I could think of is that they are treated as criminals, have a trial, and are sent to prison. But I could imagine that they get freed, or there's a breakout and or something like that. That would be the way I would anticipate it at this moment, I think.
And they are definitely martyrs for the rest of the organization. I mean, they talk about this, big plan they have for mass assassinations, although I have to say, for me, this legitimately always sounded like the plans for a coup that like German organizations trying to reinstate the king and stuff have, like very, very small like fringe groups that might have a seller with weapons somewhere, but that have no chance of actually pulling anything off. But it didn't feel like there's a legitimate like big conspiracy going on, but there were still other cells in other places. We don't know how many assassinations in the end of the day actually take place. But there is a bigger organization out there, and I don't think we can assume that in every place where they were active, they're going to be so thoroughly caught as they were here. So there's definitely still part of them out there, and they're going to look at this branch that went to Babylon 5 and failed, and then they can immediately say, yeah, of course they failed on Babylon 5 because there's all the aliens there. So clearly they had help.
And what assassinations always reminds me of is that a few, not so long ago, like a year ago, I came across a really weird podcast from some COVID denial conspiracy theorists from southern Germany and Austria who were like, yes, I was on a protest yesterday and there were like 12,000 people and they had no masks and we are such a movement and we are going to change the world and nobody is going to stop us. And I've never heard of those guys ever again. And that's really like yeah. That is actually what that reminds me of. Like, they're definitely a problem, but they also sometimes feel like extremely bigger. Like, we are going to change the universe tomorrow.
I mean, to cater to our US audience, it feels very much like the Q conspiracy expecting mass arrests to happen like any second now, like just a few more days away. And this is like where exactly the same language as is used in this episode once again comes back, like very high profile targets are gonna get arrested and taken out, and like once again exactly the same rhetoric just comes back with a slightly different flavor there. So yeah, there's definitely the sense of we are dealing with like small fish here, but it is a problem that they have some kind of backing from within Earth Force at some point, because whoever had access to this like prototype stealth suits and stuff is obviously not on the same level.
But we also have to say we don't know if the branch on the station is cut out entirely. I mean, there could still be some, well, let's say sleepers on the station that stayed out of this action and yeah are there for further instructions or anything, or just to get information.
And I mean, what we've seen also is in this very episode, there are a lot of people who just sympathize with this organization, who aren't part of it yet, but are potential recruits, who will look at all of this. And there are people who have been attacked by aliens in retaliation for the anti-alien attacks, so people got radicalized as part of this entire thing. And yeah, there's definitely going to be a new ground. Like whenever Home Guard would try sending somebody new there to find a bunch of new recruits, Babylon 5 right now is probably a pretty good source to go to.
And I mean, there are a lot of people who, what was also voiced in this episode, who just don't care.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is, I think that's even more scary part of this, because there's no resistance, or the resistance is not noticeable.
But also with all the violence you see there, I always feel when actually Garibaldi says that a few, and most of them just don't care. When you see how many people are beaten up and how that actually shakes up the situation, it's like, but maybe they will start caring if just the right person gets beaten up. So there's also a level of this radicalization that, you know, the more people get hurt, the more people suddenly care, but then also tend to care in a way that is counterproductive.
And I mean, here it comes back once again to what I think, Meike, you said this about Sinclair's big speech at the end of an episode to the reporter, where he was talking about how important it is to go to space, because otherwise the legacy of humanity is going to be forgotten. So we are in the climate where people back on Earth, and in this universe, it's very much the case that like the bulk of human population is still on Earth, has never been to space, hasn't seen any of this. Many of them are openly questioning, should we be going to space at all? Many of them are still of the sentiment, let's just stay on this planet and deal with our own problems. So if Sinclair is inclined to give a speech against this kind of sentiment, it kind of gives you an idea where the majority of people who do not care are at mentally. And if they are not caring about space even, just for humanity's expansion's sake, they are not going to care about aliens at all, and whether or not they are a threat or not. They are just, this is so far removed from their daily reality that this is just not going to factor into their day-to-day decision making. So if they hear, oh, there's a xenophobic group of people on Earth, most people look at it and say, well, there's no aliens here on Earth, so why is that a problem? Like, what would this even affect in this situation? Okay, so at this point, just smoothly, let's go into the tapestry, because we've talked a lot about the recurring themes of this episode again, and this is something that we love to do on this podcast. We look at Babylon 5, and it is not a 90s show. It is not a show that puts down the reset button every 45 minutes, but it's also not Breaking Bad. It's not a show that has like one through-line narrative like a more modern show might have. And so we love looking at the themes, the character points, the small tidbits that weave all of these episodes together into this big tapestry that JB has created. A lot of these things we already talked about. There's one thread from early on in the show that I would love to pick up, because at one point, Meike, you asked, will we see Kosh trolling again? And I think we saw a brilliant instance of this, because he gets asked, what is this screen that you're looking at? And Kosh's answer is, what it is efficient. And then he just shuts off and will not answer another word. And that is so playful for this like ancient alien entity to do. It's beautiful. At the same time though, we see him look on his screen on Earth history, and some of these pictures are wildly disturbing.
Yeah, I think there was a cut open snake. It was so changing so quickly, but yeah, that burned in my memory. Why would you look at the picture of a dead cut open snake?
There is also a lot of black and white imagery of what looks to be both world wars. There's the moon landing there, which is one of our finer moments. But in general, if I had to try and make sense of this beyond him just being an internet troll and making fun of Sinclair for even trying to ask him for help, maybe this is him like sort of checking the clock again. Is it time for humans to be Nazis again? Like it feels like he's sort of reminiscing about human history, and definitely like highlighting that everything we see in this episode isn't just here to like point a finger at anyone in particular. No, this is just acknowledging this is part of what human history is. And no matter where in the world you are watching the show, this is going to resonate because it's part of everyone's history to some degree.
You said that very beautiful.
Are there any other things of this episode that either felt to you like they picked up stuff from the past, or things that maybe point towards the future of where the show might be going?
I think we already mentioned a lot of things in our discussion. I mean, there is the recurring of the characters from The Gathering that are picked up again. I'm trying to get everything together. It's so much right now.
I mean, one thing we already talked about a lot is Sinclair, and especially Sinclair's experience on the Battle of the Line. And we didn't get anything more on sort of the mystery with the hole in his mind here, but I think it's interesting how quickly he was able to tap into this to kind of pull out this idea of only a dead alien is a good alien. It seems to me like this isn't a sentiment that he himself ever believed, but he probably has known a lot of people who served on the Battle of the Line who might have fallen into these kinds of sentiments, or at least he has a good enough understanding of how other people perceive the Battle of the Line. So it seems to me like this is something that he's dealt with before, and this is why it's so easy for him to also utilize this to his own advantage. Which
would certainly say that he, to a certain degree, experienced this from other soldiers, officers, whoever was involved in the war, because that's a normal reaction at a certain point, that if you're so deep into war, it's really a tough thing to make the differentiation and not just see everyone as an enemy.
Absolutely. And I mean, we already criticized him a bit for jumping into the fray again, but if we are having this criticism of him and saying, well, why isn't he dealing with this hero complex? Why isn't he like properly dealing with the trauma from this Battle of the Line? These might be exactly the reasons why, because he's so busy not being not falling in line with this kind of sentiment. This is already making massive progress on his side. Like, he is doing things with that, and he's just not pushing all the way through, which is fully understandable if you just get this glimpse of how much pressure there is, especially how much pressure there is obviously from the rest of human society of what he should be. I think if he is running around on Earth, and maybe this is one of the reasons he is on Babylon 5, if he's anywhere else, he's probably going to be constantly treated as this like great brave war hero who banished the alien threats, and not having to deal with this, it's clear why he wouldn't be able to deal with any more personal issues that come from that.
Yeah, and on the other hand, now he has the pressure from the alien side on the station, which doesn't leave much time on solving personal problems.
Yeah.
Traumas.
One thing from the past that we never put on the Tapestry specifically, but what is just once again a nice parallel, I think, is during the attack on Ragesh 3, we saw the one instance where Londo tried to unite all of the aliens under the cause, the Narn are aggressive, the Narn are a threat, we should all band together and form a coalition against their aggression. Which, as we've seen so far, is a rare occasion that anything unites all of the alien races. And here we saw the parallel of what this looks like when Jakar tries doing this, where he also tries to rally everybody behind him. And it's a rare occasion where we see both of these ambassadors not just care about their own people, but try to utilize actually the fact that this is a station where more alien species are together, and try to form any kind of interspecies relationship, even if it's just for their personal gain.
Yeah, and it almost works because it's the humans who are the enemy in this situation, which is, since not because of the war, but because they are the newbies in this constellation, and therefore I think it's easier for the others to come together because it's the enemy they know.
Absolutely. And with this in mind, looking a little bit to the future, one question I would love your speculation on, if you have any, is we've now seen a lot of examples of Earth caring just about Earth, of reasons why a lot of people might be very apprehensive against aliens, and reasons why people who aren't openly apprehensive against aliens might just not care about aliens at all. Then why did humans build Babylon 5 in the first place? Like, where did this come from? If we have so many reasons and so many movements, at which point was Earth in this position of actually seeking out this connection to aliens, and how did Earth get into this position?
Well, first of all, I think there were a few people, a few smart people, a few wise people having the right thoughts, being that if there are others even outside of Earth, you can't just shut yourself out of this. You either interact with them or they will come and interact with you. And if you don't do your part, they will dictate you, in the worst case, what you have to do. So it has to be on both sides. And that's the reason I would think this was built.
So then you are still sort of hopeful that even on Earth there is this sort of counterpoint to what Homeguard represents, like a group of people who actually consider this.
I'm not sure if they're still there, but I think they at least were there.
Okay.
Because otherwise you wouldn't get a project like this. I mean, of course, there were surely people who were promoting this because of, I don't know, money, power, and things like this. But I think there was also people just doing the right thing. Or at least I hope there were.
No, I'm just very happy to hear this, because, you know, there are a lot of just science fiction universes out there where even Earth is very monolithic, very dystopian or utopian. And so this would create here a situation where Earth just has a few sides. It is kind of in this balance where it could tip one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I mean, utopians and dystopians are interesting stories to play with ideas. but they come, for me at least, short in certain ways. That's way too big to elaborate here. So I'm always a fan of both sides, because one can't exist without the other, and it's, at least from my point of view, the smartest way doing things to show both sides, and not just going with one thing, because life doesn't work like that.
I completely agree with that. Okay, then the last thing before we get to our outro question and such, now that Layla isn't here, because for her that's not interesting, there's one last point I would love to talk about, because we've made this connection before, and I don't know about you, but whenever I see this episode, I think of Ashley in the Presidium talking about how she can't tell some of the aliens from the animals. Like, Mass Effect has exactly the same theme of humanity goes to the stars, fights a war against Centaurians, almost gets wiped out, and then becomes part of this, like, galactic community, and now we have space racists who are very much apprehensive against any aliens because they have experience in this war, and it isn't that long ago. And so I'm just wanting to know, does this kind of parallel feel like pop up the same way for you too, or does it feel different? Is it interesting? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we already made a few, already found a few similarities. For those listening in, we already were thinking of making some Mass Effect Babylon 5 memes, because they just felt so fitting. I totally see this here too, because I mean it's the same conception, and it's a logical occurrence. And I mean, you have this always in history, when there was a war, when there was some crucial things happening, that you have this fractions that break off and do something the normal people would think a totally crazy thing. So yeah, it fits there perfectly.
I mainly bring it up also because for me, Mass Effect is one of these instances where it isn't purely utopian or dystopian, where it kind of threads this balance. And honestly, every time I rewatch this episode now, when Sinclair gets into the role of evil Sinclair, of racist Sinclair, I kind of see like the renegade option quick time event popping up at the right side of the screen, because in Mass Effect this was much the same way. If you picked enough renegade options, Shepard could become slightly anti-alien in his sentiments. So it just felt like, okay, this is just a different dialogue tree that Sinclair's picking from. Yeah, I can see how BioWare would do this.
I have to admit, I never played the bad side, because I just can't play bad characters. No matter which game I play, I can't play the bad version, because I always feel bad.
It's also, I feel like the renegade options in Mass Effect are so much less consistent. Like they tried very hard, but at some point, like, it just very much clashes that you have this character who is bent on saving the galaxy and keeping his team alive, but also is the ruthless guy that doesn't care about anything. Like, it's just, it's a nice toy, and it makes for some funny interactions, but I don't think as like a full-on gaming route, it really holds up. So yeah, but that's, maybe at some point we'll have a Mass Effect spin-off of this podcast where we just go into all of these details and have like a playthrough of Mass Effect 1 as Sinclair, just always choosing the most heroic Paragon option possible. That could be fun. But for now, let's think quickly about a community question. We don't have a big poll or something that we would have to talk about right now, especially because we talked about some of the Centauri questions before. But do we maybe have a question that we would like to pose for our community today? I mean, just after this small talk, my question would be, do people have a favorite future portrayal of humanity, be that utopian, be that dystopian, or something in between?
Yeah, I think we can go with that.
Okay, with this much enthusiasm, I will just keep this version in, and then we can go to the outro. Do you want to take us out?
No, you can do this.
Okay, yeah, I have gathered some experience. By the time this episode comes out, everybody is hopefully already going to know this, but we were part of the League of Non-Aligned Podcasts who did a special event for the animated Babylon 5 film, The Road Home, that came out, where for, I think, 2.5 hours, we talked about everything that happens in this movie, went through it scene by scene, timeline by timeline. It was very, very, very fun, very great honor to be part of it as well. And so we will definitely have linked this in all our social media channels. And if you're interested to hear more from us, we have social media channels, Twitter /X, Facebook, Instagram, where we are always active, posting behind the scenes stuff, little questions that came up, bits and bobs of our discussions here that warrant further discussion. And we are very happy for any kind of input that you want to give us. You can find us on all these channels and everywhere you find podcasts at the Third Age Podcast.
Yes, and when you give us a comment, we're really happy to read anything what crosses your mind. But also if it's just a like, a share, or anything like that, we're really happy to see that, because only if you tell us, we know if we're doing a good job or if we have to improve on something. That's also something you can write us if you have anything where you think, that have you done good, but that you could do a bit more about that. Please tell us, otherwise it will stay the same.
Yes, exactly to this point. We already talked about it last week, but we, for example, we liked getting the input on how long of discussions episodes people prefer, that it's like around the 1 hour mark, but we also very much appreciate people commenting to us that we should really just take as however long we think we need to talk about these episodes, and ultimately, of course, that's what we are going to do, as you can probably see by the timeline of this video right now. But yeah, we just very much encourage it just to see that people are involved and are interested in what we're doing. So we are very excited to see you next time, when we are going to talk about The Sky Full of Stars, which is going to be a very interesting episode, especially because I think a lot of threads that we picked up on this episode are going to go straight through there.
Then we hope you had fun listening or watching us in this episode, and hope to see you next week.